So now it's my pleasure to introduce Barb Pahl. She's the Senior Vice President for the Field Services at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Barb began with the National Trust in 1984 as Assistant Director of the Mountains Plains Regional Office in Denver, before becoming Regional Director in 1991. She was named Western Regional Vice President in 2011 and Senior Vice President for Field Services in 2016. In 2010, Barb led a team of National Trust staff and outside experts to complete a green restoration of the historic Emerson School in Denver, which is one of the only preservation hubs of its kind. Barb received CPI's Dana Crawford Award in 2007 and the Keystone Award from Historic Denver in 2015. And of course, Barb has a long history with CPI, and we're pleased to have her here today. Barb, please join us.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that very warm introduction. It's always nice to be playing on the home field in the company with so many of my friends and colleagues that I've enjoyed working with over the years, a lot of years. Americans care about the loss of places they love. Everyone, every community has a story about a place that was lost as a result of fire, demolition, or neglect. Mine was the implosion of the Montgomery Wards building that used to be located on South Broadway near I-25. Unfortunately, many do not equate historic preservation with the places that provide them with emotional resonance and a sense of community and belonging. Many think of preservation only in terms of buildings and not in terms of how our work gives meaning to the present and hope for the future. As you all know, last year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the National Historic Preservation Act. And over the 2 years leading up to this anniversary, the National Trust convened more than 20 meetings across the country with people who consider themselves preservationists and people who don't, asking them what the future of preservation in this country should look like. And while the future for preservation may look a little less certain today than it did when we began these conversations 2 years ago, the recent election showed us that we are a people who have not had enough conversations about our past to hear the stories, the heartbreaks, and the dreams of all Americans. After all, we are a country that has routinely thrown away our past for a promised better future. The West was born out of this idea, but I firmly believe that preservation gives us the places and the spaces to have an open and honest conversation in a nonpartisan setting outside of the 24/7 news cycle. I believe our work as preservationists has never been more important because historic places contain the stories and bear witness to the events of a past that will teach us how we can improve our lives for the future. Simply put, historic preservation makes our lives better. These stories are our collective memories and together provide meaning, instruction, and inspiration for how we can overcome our challenges and capitalize on our opportunities for the future. They create a sense of continuity that helps people feel more balanced, stable, and healthy. Through place, people know they belong, and it's up to us to inspire all of our citizens to see themselves in our shared American past. On the screen is a word cloud that was created from the conversations we had about the future of preservation. Not surprisingly, the word preservation was heard most often. However, the next most common words were historic, places, and people. This seems simple enough. After all, who are we saving these places for? We're saving them for people. A preservation movement for people is one that is grounded in human needs and the stories and meanings of the place and the traditions that matter to them. Keeping older and historic places alive and vibrant and responsive contemporary needs through continuous use or reuse is a recognized way to achieve sustainable, equitable, and healthy communities. 3 concepts support the vision of the future of a people-centered preservation movement. The first is that the movement hears, understands, and honors the full diversity of our ever-evolving American history. The recognition of our stories and the capacity to see yourself and others in the American narrative has profound effect on our sense of identity, well-being, and belonging. A few years back, when the National Trust Conference was held in Nashville, Congressman John Lewis challenged us to believe in the idea that my house is your house, that my story is your story, and the history of my people is the history of all Americans, not just African Americans. At far too many places, at historic sites, historic districts, we have forgotten to tell all of the stories of the people associated with these places. Less than 10% of places listed on the National Register tell the stories of diverse Americans, gay and lesbian Americans, or women. A preservation practice more firmly rooted in people will be more inclusive in identifying and designating places that represent the stories of all Americans. The second concept is that a people-centered preservation movement creates and nurtures more equitable, healthy, resilient, vibrant, and sustainable communities. Older and historic places are assets that serve individuals and communities. And these places can provide stable and affordable housing, provide space for startups and existing businesses to operate successfully. By using and reusing historic and older buildings, we lessen the environmental impacts of demolition and new construction and take advantage of the investment already made in existing streets, sidewalks, and public transit to create healthy, walkable neighborhoods. For the last 50 years, preservation has done a good job developing tools and rules that helped us save architecture. However, I believe we have not done enough to craft tools and incentives that have allowed people to remain connected to their place. So we need to seek to avoid or eliminate practices that lead to inequality of displacement by working preemptively and collaboratively with all communities to equalize the market conditions that would push them out of the places they love. The third is that a people-centered preservation movement collaborates with new and existing partners to address fundamental social issues that makes the world better. The critical importance of preserving our older and historic places becomes more obvious to other fields when preservation works in tandem with them to make communities livable, equitable, sustainable, and vibrant. Forging and expanding working partnerships with organizations and agencies and other disciplines greatly broadens the impact of our work and the work of our partners. Preservationists sometimes have difficulty making new collaborations because we're often seen as a special single interest. They think we are the people of no, standing in the way of progress, opposed to change, when in fact we're just the opposite. Our goal is to manage change, to have a voice in the way our communities and neighborhoods are going to look, to be part of the change, not standing in the way of it. Working with property owners and elected officials and developers, we generally can arrive at a solution that is a balance between the preservation goals and the economic interests of an owner. But we sometimes speak in a language few people outside of this room can understand or can certainly be made to care about. And fundamentally, preservation is a political movement. So we're going to have to convince people to join us if we're going to be successful. But our words won't be convincing until we learn to speak in terms people care about, instead of overwhelming them with talk of regulation and criteria. Let's stop saying that older and historic places enhance a community and start saying that older and historic places are essential to a community's health, well-being, identity, and sense of place. Let's make use and reuse of historic buildings the default instead of demolition. Let's make it easier to get a rehab permit approved rather than a demolition permit. If we embrace this future, preservation will more fully be incorporated into the related fields such as affordable housing and art, building trades, conservation, economic development, education, environmental justice, health and welfare, social justice, and sustainability. 50 years ago, the drafters of the National Historic Preservation Act imagined a future where historic places are a living part of their communities. This vision still resonates today. And over the last 50 years, we learned a lot about how to save buildings, save good architecture. But it is the story of these places that has the power to inspire us and drive us to be that more perfect union. A people-centered preservation movement empowers everyone to tell their personal stories that are connected to place and to engage in the saving of the places that matter to them. It has the potential to sustain, improve, and enrich the lives of people through the places where they live, work, and play. I look forward to a day when preservation becomes an even more prevalent, powerful, and practical force to sustain, improve, and enrich people's lives. So here's to an amazing future. Thank you.